Welcome to the bright side of the moon, a journey of magic and wonder, and most of all, beauty.
Chapter 13. Gonna Get Married. 7th of July, 1975. As soon as we returned, it was back to the studio. The USA tour and Nebworth were behind us. Our life began to melt together in a more established home life mixed with the Floyds' growing fame as time passed. When I had said yes to come to live with David, I had no idea that yes really had to do with something else. It had to do with saying yes to something growing inside of me that would take many years to awaken, i.e., my own innate calling to be an artist. I was instinctively inspired by the creative power of the band, especially David's guitar playing and his voice. Most of all, our love triggered an internal desire to create a child. So many times I whispered softly in his ear that when he was ready, I was ready to make a baby. I could not have dreamt of doing anything else but that at the time. My body screamed to have our child, our love child. But it seemed that we were drifting apart. A fear crept into my being. The fire was dimming a bit. It worried me. Living with a musician in a band was very new to me. One day he was there, and the next he was on tour or recording. And I was not always aware of the tensions growing in the band. Moreover, just about how much of that tension subtly influenced our relationship. For David held most of these matters to himself. It is only now reading some of the stories that I realize more of what went on behind the scenes of our life within the band. But the instinctive impulse to bear a child from our love remained the same, as something seemed to grow quiet between us. Or was it just the process of time, merging the hearts of two individuals in the blending of two cultures? I loved him, that was for sure. And I wondered, does one ever know about the cycles of love for the first time? We were young, learning about life and learning about love. During their second leg of the American tour in 1974, I stayed behind, and I decided to go to Lindos with two girlfriends, Cindy Shirley, Jerry Shirley's wife, drummer of Humble Pie, and Cindy's girlfriend, Sharon, who had just come over from the States. I was sick with bronchitis most of the time and observed the girls from my window in the sala in their tight silk Chinese dresses and high heels dancing in the courtyards, ghetto blaster blaring, and a bit drunk with a few Greek soldiers they were. During that time, I drifted in and out of thoughts and feelings about maybe leaving David. So when I got home, this was very much on my mind. What had started out as a dream come true was maybe changing, and maybe a broken heart loomed in the corner. David called from the States and asked if I would pick him up the next day. I reminded him of my last statement about doing that, and he said, please. So I did. I drove miles and miles and miles down the North Circular to get to Heathrow, through the traffic, and the traffic was always trying. I waited at the arrival point for him to come out, full of alternating emotions. I was excited, but nervous, happy, yet hurt. Most of the band were first, and they smiled as they passed by, anxious to get home, disappearing in the crowd. David appeared, and he walked straight up to me, gently pushing me up against the nearby wall in a passionate embrace. With the return of his passion, I was stunned. He was always good at sending love just whenever I was having a turn away. His timing was always perfect, and it worked for many years, and it certainly worked that day. Warwick Macready had become their personal road manager for the tours, and as he was a dear friend and neighbor, we gave him a lift home. He drove and stopped for petrol on the North Circular, and when Warwick went in to pay, David asked me to marry him. I couldn't believe my ears. The day was warm and sunny, so we laid in the garden sharing stories. We were so happy to be together, close, at home, when again he asked me to marry him. I hadn't responded earlier, with Warwick returning to the car. Truly, I was a bit in shock. I just couldn't believe it. Did David actually propose? I questioned myself years later why I had said yes, for my heart had been so let down. But there I was, nestled in his arms, and I said, yes. I really wanted the dream to be real and continue, and it did. Another cycle began for us that day. The Floyd were working on Wish You Were Here in Abbey Road Studios during this time. There was the Nebwith gig on the 5th of July. So David organized all the paperwork we needed, and we were to be married in Epping Forest council office, where you do these things. So it was a very special weekend at the concert, and then our wedding day. Willie Wilson and Ricky and Lenny Wills were staying over that weekend, and as they were leaving, David went up to them and asked them to stay. And they said, why? And they said, well, Ginger and I, we're going to get married, and we'd like you to be there. Willie was washing dishes when David told him, and he dropped the cloth and said, "Oh my God, I'm the last one that isn't married." Very special. And we also had Jerry Shirley and Cindy Shirley come there as well. Interesting. I mean, I don't know about you, but one dreams of the day you get married, and I mean, so many people do huge parties, and the dress and the suit and the best man and your best friend holding the corsage. And we didn't need that. We didn't. Do you know, honestly, we didn't even think about the ring. It's like, it's one of those family stories that stays with us because I don't know what planet we were on. And the poor man that was marrying us, I mean, he looked at us as time was held still. And he looked at David and said, excuse me, do you have the ring? Because he had this little red pillow in front of him waiting for the ring or the rings to be put there. And in the end, Linny had some little type ring that you get in a cracker box, popcorn, that she handed to us to use. I should have framed it. I don't know what happened to it. But it was amazing. And we went off to the pub finally, and we had a bit of English lunch things, and we had to get to Abbey Road Studios because of the band recording Wish You Were Here. So we toddled off and got there into Studio One when Roger, all of them came up to him and said, "Dave, can you come over here for a minute? There's someone sitting in the sofa just in front of the mixing desk. They wanted to see if he could identify him." And so David went around and looked at this person that was completely shaved, even on the arms, pear-shaped, no expression in his eyes. And Dave looked back at Roger and said, "It's Sid." They tried to engage him in conversation, and he didn't respond. They asked about the music because it was inspired. Shine On was inspired by the experience that they went through in the early days when they lost Sid, basically. But there was nothing coming out. To this day, I have no idea how we got there. And I don't know, there's such a mystery around it all. So it's July 7th, 1975 is a day within my history to remember, and I share that with you now. Thank you.